cost and in the project cost. We do have a summary of the cost. We do have council, you have, and there's extra copies of that. Copies of the original cost estimate that we did last year, plus the revised one. But I would ask you to look at, this is what the original one was that we provided in May. So these are the committed costs. This is the upper part of the spreadsheet. This is the first page of your spreadsheet. It's the big 11 by 17 sheet. And then $300,000 for CD oversight. Blacktail Creek. We noted that the Blacktail Creek funding. So we have looked at reducing that. I'll go through that in more detail. We also had the Montana Tech and the Butte Silverbowl Reveg contracts that with the bid costs, as well as our administrative fees that we need to close out the fund. The next list is on the same page as the list of the projects. The Butte Area 1, Alluvial Aquifer pumping project, the NRDP proposed, Blacktail Creek investigation, the Blacktail Creek restoration project, both on the golf course and the sewer line, the Parrot, Butte Silverbowl had the meters, the meter program, and Butte Silverbowl had the enhancement of the Basin Creek pavilion and the rec center. So these are the costs that we are looking at. As I said, Silverbowl, the program, and got back and analyze these costs and come back with some revisions to those. We're going to go over those. Then we have a new table of this that we'll present to you to show where we are now on this plan. So with that, I'm going to skip ahead and let Shawn talk about what he has for the Basin Creek recreation.
Great, thank you, Doug. I'm Shawn Fredrickson, Parks and Recreation Director for Butte Silverbowl. I appreciate you moving me up. My wife's cousin is getting married in September. They're having an engagement party for the folks that can't make it there. So that started at 6. So I appreciate you let me coach. So we were talking about a few different reductions in costs for the Basin Creek Park project. And first, I just want to repeat what I said at a couple meetings ago. You know, we are committed to opening Basin Creek Reservoir to recreation, fishing, and opening it up for recreation in the whole area. I just want to repeat that. We are committed to that. I think we need a few different steps before we get there. One of them is the park. And if you've been out to the park has opened. It's in rough shape. I don't think there's been any upgrades to the park for a very long time. I don't even know. I mean, way beyond my time. And go out there, the park's in really rough shape. So I think that if we were to open it up to recreation, the first step is getting this park up to a standard where we could handle an influx. One of the things that I talked about a couple meetings ago was getting the park, the first step, getting the park to a place where we could have people there that want to be there to hang out, and then opening it up to recreation first with some sort of, summer camps, supervised vision of bringing people into the reservoir to fish. And I think that would be a really great thing for our community. We just opened up on the park sides programming for youth, and this would be a really key piece of having summer camps, having field trips, be really the possibilities. So I just want to repeat that we are committed to opening it up. I wouldn't feel comfortable unless we can get that park to a place where people would want to hang out. We do have the logical pine pavilion, which is great. That's been in there, over 100 years. But if you go to the park, there's nowhere really to sit. There's nowhere really to really do anything. So, you know, a key piece is that pavilion, that new pavilion. That's a central piece of that park where you have people to come in. There's shelter. There's multiple tables. There's places for you to cook a burger or a hot dog or have a sandwich. But after talking with Doug this week and going and looking at the logical time pavilion, I tend to agree with Doug that maybe that piece of rehabilitating that doesn't fit into what the BNRC and the recreation want. You know, it's in rough shape. It needs to be taken off of the bathroom that it's located on right now. That needs to be decommissioned, but it's already decommissioned. That needs to be completely, you know, off limits, if not removed. So I think that that's a bigger project that would probably likely cost more than the $150,000 that I conceptually drew up for it. It's probably going to involve a specialized crafts person to come in and deconstruct it, remove it, and then reconstruct it. So, and I agree with Doug that that probably doesn't fit into what we're trying to do to enhance the recreation space. So when I was looking at the cost reduction, I scratched that off first and foremost. And also the historic preservation aspect of it. I think there would probably be funds that we could go after within historic preservation and really do it right and get it onto a solid foundation so we hopefully don't have to do this ever. So reducing the price of the $150,000, that brought the cost down to $734,827. So then I started going through and looking at what else we could possibly reduce. And there's not much, to be honest with you. These are all conceptual numbers. Hopefully, if this council was fortunate enough to approve this project, we would hopefully come in under what I requested. I really have, we did the best we could at estimating these numbers. But hopefully the project would come under, and those funds would obviously go back into the recreation category. You know, one thing that I'm working on right now within all of our parks is weed control. Our weed department is a whole other department, Silver Bow, and they have their whole hands full just without our parks. And so what I'm doing is putting more weed people on my staff, weed sprayers, and we're getting an actual weed sprayer for the department to spray weeds. So, I mean, I could think that maybe the price would go down on the $16,000 just because we would be doing more in-house. But other than that, you know, looking at this, there's not too much I can really pinpoint as the price reduction. So, so that's where we stand now at $734,000. You know, maybe we could cut a little bit down to $7,000, but I'll leave that up to the side. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about this. We started having people reserve Basin Creek. Some of the feedback is that it's we have some massive trees that need to be probably taken down, trees replanted. I posted that, or I showed the slide of the park when it was, you know, in 1912 or whatever it was, and there's just trees lined up all along it. We would like to plant those trees and bring it back to how it used to. And we'd love to have the BNRC and the council be a partner in this project, be part. So yeah, I'm here to answer any questions, and I appreciate the time.
Take questions from the council first. Anybody have any questions for Shawn?
Looking here, the contracted money that's unspent, Bill Callahan, University, is $411,000. Okay? And I didn't hear you talk on anything with the rebate. I'm kind of curious. Erickson you're talking.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't
Never
know.
mind.
I don't know much about the reveg projects. I'm not the expert. Just parks.
Any other questions for Sean? Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate, yes. And if you have any other questions at the end, Eric can say it should be. Or I'm obviously available. If you guys don't take it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody mind?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's.
Right now, Josh.
So I'm Zane Gleason. I'm the project manager and compliance specialist for Butte Silver Bottle. At the end of the last meeting, we were asked to provide a 2-year program and provide some numbers for that. So right here, you'll see the 2-year project cost. So we are requesting $852,740. Of this, $345,168 will be for meter purchases. Installation by VSB Water Division staff is $7,572 for salary and benefits. And the grant program is $500,000. It was asked earlier if the $9 for labor was a typo, but our budget office went through all the numbers, and with it only taking approximately 10 minutes to install a meter, that's what they felt they should go after for this.
So Zane, before you go on, if that number is the same number that was in the original proposal,
I believe so, yeah. It's
so
nothing.
no change from what you submitted last, time, except you're doing just 10% a year of the meters, 2 years, 20% of the meters that, of the 4,000 meters.
Yep.
Instead of the full amount, so.
Yep.
But the salary and benefits that you presented in the proposal last time and now is the same.
Yes. And then in the 2-year meter proposal, we plan to re-indicate the free meter program for flat rate accounts to switch to water meter. We'll work with the county attorney and other collaborators to review policy for water meters new construction. And we'll inform the public of the meter program so that they're aware how they can participate in it. We'll determine the income requirement to ensure we're providing a safety net for those who want to participate, but may not be able to afford to do so. For example, the census tracts 1, 2, 8. And then there's 2 things that I didn't have in here that we thought of after is we don't intend to immediately draw the grant funds, but have it in reserve as a safety net for those who need it. And anticipation of future draws, we would have this framework designed. And then with already having the water bills where the flat rate accounts are, we'll be able to target those areas easier. Make sure that we're being mindful of all the dollars.
So when you talk about working with the county attorney to review the policy for water meters with new construction, so right now they're required.
They're required.
Yes. So when you talk about reviewing that, what do you think?
Some of it might be for like for humanity, like if they fall under general grants, fall under those census tracts, and then how we if they're
Okay, okay. So then they would go through the grant program then
Yes.
to get, okay, I see. Okay.
Zach, can you go back to the previous slide, please?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so question I have, John McKee, council, in your proposal that was attachment D to last time, there's 12,976 units that were coming out at $362 a piece. Now you want $408 a piece.
$408, I believe. I don't know. I remember the last time. I'd have to pull it up, but I thought it said 408.
Well, from your
We went, I
budget
know,
spread, it comes out to 3,936.
but we ended up calculating for they changed their prices just a couple months ago. I think we added somewhere in that last proposal.
Okay.
But the current price is $408.
Okay.
Any other questions from the council? For Zane? Go ahead.
Well, I guess Suzanne, on Rec Council, where are the meters sourced from?
Alabama.
So, Madam Chair, John says so saying that the transaction cost to stand up the grants program that makes sense and to go to the next slide. And to inform the public and to determine the income requirements, those are all provided as a match to the amount that you have requested for the 2-year pilot program.
Correct.
So those tasks will be done by staff as a match to the grant.
Yes.
And then, so that takes me back to the first bullet there, Elizabeth Erickson. So the flat rate accounts under this program, meters would be free
Yes.
to hook up. So then the grants part of it is for low income that have some problems with their plumbing.
Yes.
Okay, all right, I'm with you now. Okay. Any other questions? Sister, did you have any questions online?
Yes, I do. I think the hand raised, but I'm not sure. My question is on the last proposal we had from you, you had amounts designating all of the various people who would be involved with this who are already on Butte Silver Bow's payroll. And now you're saying tonight that you're going to use those as matching for the grant?
Yes, that's correct.
I kind of wonder if there's a problem with that. Because I thought matching grants should have been dollar for dollar.
That I am not completely sure on.
And not salaries.
Yeah, the grants have to be for dollar.
The matching should be dollar per dollar.
Instead of our time.
Well,
There's no required.
my recollection, Madam Chair, John says so, my recollection, Zane, was that the larger program that you presented last time, the 10-year program, also included considerable effort by Butte Silver Bowl to go through ordinance changes to convert everybody at some point to meters.
Yes.
Also to as I remember it, you were going to continue the program to change out existing meters with the new meters that were compatible with the Neptune system. And that was presented as part of the match as a global project on the metering programs.
Yes, that's correct, yes.
So I didn't really hear what Sister's question was, but there's considerable effort beyond in the proposal, even though this is 2 years, all of the other elements in the 10-year proposal would be done under the 2-year program. You're going to stand up the grants program, but you're also going to continue to replace existing meters. You're also going to look at the ordinance changes necessary to move towards meters.
Yes.
All that's part of the project as outlined.
Along with like the public outreaches and everything that we'll be doing.
Thank you.
Yep.
The other issue I have is that the other proposal was for over 4,000 meters. Is that correct?
Yes, the other one was, so we just, so this one, you can see right here, this one is for 846 meters.
Okay, but that's quite a far cry from 4,000 some.
Yes. That's because, well, we just took the 10 years and then just did the math and cut it down to 2 based on what we proposed the last time, knowing that we'd be able to still get that amount.
So what was the total amount you asked for on the last proposal?
I don't know off the top of my head. The total cost was $4,209,733.
And this time your proposal is for,
So the total, yeah, that's for the match. The total of the whole project is $8,477,179.
Okay.
That includes like all our match.
so what causes the difference other than the number of meters you're installing? You have 852,740 to request. And last time it was what, for 4,000 meters?
Yes, but the last time was for the 10 years, and then we were asked to come back with the 2 years. So these numbers are based off of what we figured it would cost each year, and then we just doubled it for this.
So we're not going to really tackle all of the homes in Butte that need meters.
Not that we originally did with them. If it's successful, we would plan on coming back for more funding, once we can prove that it works.
You know, I'm sorry we didn't have these figures sooner because it would have been very helpful. The other question I have is, I'm not sure this fits in with our mission, which is to do restoration. Because what's happening here with the meters, we're purchasing new meters for homes who do not have them presently. But it seems to me that's an operational expense for the Butte Water Company, which should be in their budget to begin with.
We do have purchased some meters. We have I think we ordered, was almost a couple hundred meters or change, but we're not doing the flat rate ones. We're changing out the existing ones with those that need to be updated because they didn't make the parts from any meter that's from 2011 prior. Doesn't.
So this proposal doesn't really cover new meters into new homes, but it covers replacement meters. Is that correct?
It would cover new meters for new homes if they met the income levels. Hopefully, that's something we would have to talk about with the county attorney's office that was mentioned in that slide right there.
So Sister Doug would like to take on the question of how this fits into our restoration mission.
I'd appreciate it.
This is Doug Martin. Sister Mary Jo and others, so in the past, we have done the analysis of this and have funded meters in Anaconda and in Butte with the knowledge that meters save water. So getting people off the flat rate, they're going to use less water. That conserves water of a natural resource that is damaged within the basin. So, you know, it's less water that you would have to, you know, take out of Basin Creek, pull out of the Big Hole, and in the sense of Anaconda, less water that they would have to pull out of the aquifer that's eventually going to make it to the Washington Creek. So it is a cost savings, or excuse me, a water savings action that will help the natural resources that were damaged.
Okay, I appreciate that answer.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Suzanne Ludwig. Hey, so my question is what other, have you considered other sources of funding? Because it's not just good down county that benefit from conserving water, although we have, quite a money here for purpose that you can make the case fit, but obviously we're probably not the only source of funding that you can available to do this. Has anything else been pursued?
This is Doug Martin again. I think that's partly a question for Zane that was asked previously. So, Butte Silver Bowl could look for other match. I think they are providing match by also doing a lot of, in-house work themselves on certain things. But yes, other funds could be brought to this project to make the dollars go further. But there is no matching fund requirement within the BAO plan for restoration. It's something that we encourage. But I think as John pointed out and Zane has talked about, they are providing in-kind service, which is considered match. Butte Silver Bowl is, and so there is some match with that. But I would suspect there's other grants. No,
I wasn't really asking about match. I just asked, like, if we weren't here, obviously Butte Silver Bowl would still benefit by conserving this water. But is there other sources?
Oh,
That's what I meant.
I haven't reached out to anything for meter wise, but for like service lines, with the service line inventory, there was a certain amount of funding at one point for that we applied for, but that's just for the service line. So if we ran into a situation where there is possibly a galvanized service line, we could use some of that funding that we have left possibly for that. But we couldn't use it to put towards the meter. But we haven't explored other options for the strictly those.
And I don't know, it's not an area I work in, but like Bozeman, for example, been booming and growing for the last 20 years, and I'm sure they need to conserve water, and they have water meters, and like where maybe they put it all on the customer. I don't know, is that what you guys are trying to do here, is to not put the burden on the customer because we have this problem? I guess I'm just trying to. I know your argument fits, but I don't like it. I don't like the use of these funds for that. This is a personal thing to me, but thanks.
Just from talking to the public and people that are calling, waiting for a program to start, they don't have the money right now to go. They don't want to spend the money to go purchase a meter right now because they can't afford to do it. So this program would be able to help get all of those.
So right now, the only way to get a meter is to spend the $408, and then you guys come down and install them?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's more for lower income as well, and yeah. Any other questions from the council? Anything from the public?
There might be just a comment from Council John McKee. Just noting from the budget, yes, there is a match. I'm just always curious. And again, Doug, obviously you've gone through this budget, so you know that it's here, but more than 10% of the entire match is just paying Butte Silver Bowl pensions, health insurance, retirement, and their IDC rate. I mean, I get it that we're, match is a match, but we're paying all these indirect, not just indirect costs for the project, but we're paying people's pensions out of this instead of doing water meters on this match. That's 10% of the entire match of Butte Silver Bowl. And I guess that's legit.
This is Doug Martin with the Natural Resource Damage Program. John, yeah, we pay as part of our contracts indirects on many contracts. If we have them with Montana Tech or the University of Montana, there are indirects that are requirements of what the contract will be in.
So on this one, the indirects is over $690,000. Are you aware that we're paying $690,000 to pay insurance and pension funds? Not indirect costs. I'm talking about go up to their line item for benefits, 59% of salary. They got 405 there. You add in $1.63 on their IDC rate, you get right up around 600. Are you aware that we're paying of that? It's not IDC. IDC is 15%. I get that. We're paying 400,000 of this to pay people's pensions, and pay people's pensions who are already employees of the county attorney, the public works director, the reclamation director. Are we doing this to do meters, or is there a way we can carve that out?
That's not the case, Jim.
Help me.
I mean, those dollars are provided as match. They're not being paid by NRD dollars.
No, well, in a way they are, because we're matching $1 to something there, yes. But we're matching $1 to something that's already been paid. If we don't put any money on the table, they still get their pensions, they still get their health insurance. That's a double dip.
I don't agree.
Okay.
The proposal that we got last time provided the NRD dollars, the BAO dollars were paid the laborers to install the meters to the tune of 833 hours. And this was for 10 years.
Yeah.
And
that's
in this proposal, they are basically saying that a 2-year program is 20% of that. So it's, you know, about $4,000 to $5,000.
Again, no, that's the cost that we're paying. I'm talking about their match side and the things that they're adding up in their match side. And so we're just might be miscommunicating on the numbers we're looking at. But you're right, absolutely what you just said is correct. It's their match side, not these numbers are being presented here, but on the match side of the incidentals, if you will, the benefits of 59% of salary. They called out more than just the laborers putting these meters in as part of their match. And so they are, those people who are on that side of it, if you will, they're already getting their pensions, they're already getting their health insurance, already paid for by taxpayers' dollars. Then they're asking to use that as a match to what we're doing now. And we don't need to use that as a match to do that now. We can get more bang for our buck by not double paying a match on there, or double matching, if you will. We're not paying, but double matching a benefit that they're already being paid by the taxpayers.
John,
Sorry, I mean, we're just seeing different numbers, but.
well, they're presenting this to show what commitment the local government is making to make this meters program work in the long term. It's not like the money is coming out of the NRD program.
Correct. Other than over matching, in my opinion.
So this is Doug Martin. So I think, John, so on one hand, I mean, the way I look at this budget is the Butte Silver Bow was asking for the BAO restoration plan for funds to pay for the installation and the purchase of the meters. They provided their staff time as match. That is customary. A lot of match goes to that, and we can talk about that further. But I don't see it as double dipping.
Okay, but thank you.
Courtney, I think the misnomer is when you have somebody put on here a match, they're actually working on the project, but their salary is coming from another source, not from this. That's the main point there. It's not coming from anywhere else.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Go ahead, sister.
I don't want to belabor this, but what was the total amount of your request for this part of the program on the first document we got?
On the first one that we
Yes.
said, what was the question?
Looking at the proposal from last time, it was $1.7 million dedicated to 10 years to install 4,239 meters, 423 meters a year. And from what I see, Zane, correct me if I'm wrong, 345,000 is 10% of 1.729 times 2.
Yep.
2 years instead of 10 years.
Well, maybe John, the confusion is on their spread, it says 12,796 units.
Excuse me?
On the spread they provided, it says 12,976 units, not 4,000 units. That might be your confusion.
There's 12,000 some customers on the system. The people, 8,000 meters have already been installed, and there's 4,239 meters left to go.
Got it, just from the spread, there's nothing that shows that, so we're trying to do math on the spread. There's 12,976 units, and it says it's 1.7 million. That might be what Sister Mary Jo is also speaking to too, is at least on the spread provided, that's not the numbers given.
Back a couple of pages.
It's attachment to last week's and last month's meeting.
Well, is that correct?
Yes.
There's 12,000 plus users on the system. 8,000 plus are already.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
All right, does that answer your question, sister?
Uh, Yes, in a way, but I'm still wondering how it's going to be determined who gets the meters, since they're not all going to go to homes that are not metered, but they're also going to some homes that are replacement meters. At least that's what I got from the explanation.
Didn't hear that all, sorry.
I think, go ahead.
Go ahead.
If you can speak just a little bit louder, sister, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
I will. This proposal is for 846 meters. Now, my understanding in the discussion, some of these will be replacement meters for meters that are outdated and not working properly. Is that correct?
No, we already have meters in stock for that we're gonna do a replacement program with.
So these are new homes that are on, right now on flat rates that are gonna be switched to meters, that want to switch to meters. Right now,
So
they're all.
These 846 meters are going to new homes.
Or homes that are on flat rates,
Okay,
that don't want to switch.
thank you.
Just to clarify, there's a sister effort going on within Butte Silver Bowl's water division to start replacing existing meters
Yes.
with new ones, so they're hooked up to the Neptune system, so you can monitor water use better and modernize the whole system. So there's two separate programs going on. Get the 4,239 flat rate people on meters. In the meantime, get those other 8,000 people who had gotten meters over the years that have to be replaced so that we can monitor water use better and manage the resource better.
Yes, and then the meters that are already installed for the next like 20 years, I mean, we're constantly gonna be doing the 300 or 400 meters just for thousands.
And it's that latter program that's being paid entirely by Butte Silver Bowl.
Yes.
That is, John, in terms of your question, a lot of the effort that's being made as an in-kind match are to do that.
And John, thank you. I was looking at attachment D from last month. You're showing attachment B is what some people have been speaking to, and that's been the disconnect. So my apologies. But to your point, that 8,000 other meters are being used as a matching expense. So a normal government expense that they were already going to do, they're now using for a matched expense on the project. So now it's 2.9 million plus. That's already normal government business is getting used as a match to do what we're doing. So,
But in the context, Madam Chair, in the context of the proposal that they made, I thought it was useful that we got a flavor for the entire program that's going on, not just the flat rate meters, the conversion from flat raters to metered systems. So I thought it was beneficial to at least understand that this is more than just getting these 4,000 people on the meters that aren't on meters. There's a whole other thing going on there that is important to characterize as you evaluate the value of this.
We have one question online.
Go ahead online. We have one question.
Hi, Elizabeth. It's Eric Nyland, citizen. Thank you. I guess you guys are talking. I'm looking at this and I'm hearing John and Sister talk. You've got salaries in here that are already being paid. They're budgeted, they're passed by the council. It's already a normal government expense. To call that a match that's already happening, it's not an additional effort, not an additional contribution. These people are going to be paid whether this is matched or not. That goes into the normal government contribution. But I also want, Doug said they did an analysis. Is there any chance of getting that posted publicly so we can all see it? Because, you even mentioned the big hole, which is a complete different basin. And the damage to Basin Creek that you referenced, I think the public deserves to see this since this is public money, not dedicated Butte Silver Bow money. Thanks.
I got the first part of it. Second part, what was Eric, what did you want published?
Well, Doug mentioned the analysis that they've done, that this is a valid expenditure, but he also referenced the big hole, which is a different basin and Basin Creek. But, we are talking about public money being used to undertake a normal government expense. So, before we spend public money anywhere, I mean, the public should have an idea to what this analysis was so we can understand it. And I'm asking him if he'd post that maybe on the NRDP website so we can all understand how NRD came to this decision.
Okay, so you're talking about like the legal analysis that is, yeah, okay. And I don't.
Normal.
This is Doug Martin, Eric. That was an analysis we did back in the grants program. And I will try to dig that up and we will provide that.
Thank you. And I would also just add, I mean, what the NRD is being asked to do is enact public policy for Butte Silver Bow in a backwards way. The talk last meeting about changing ordinances and mandates. The cart seems to be way before the horse because the public in Butte Silver Bow and the council have not had an opportunity to weigh in on this. I tread with caution because it's going to be pointed at you as the driver of it. Thank you.
All right. Is that all of the questions? We're good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, there we go.
Members of the council, members online, I'm Eric with Butte Silver Bow, here to talk about the Butte revegetation program and potential reduction in annual allocations. So good timing, really, with the insufficiently reclaimed and unreclaimed work that's happening underneath the Butte CD and wanting to protect any investment that the NRD and BNRC makes in regards to rebed going forward until these sites have been fully evaluated and brought up to today's current specs. We only want to do some work on those that have already been through the process. So just wanted to say the timing is good. For fiscal year 25-26, I would propose keeping the budget standard because we do have 3 projects that are identified that have been through that process. And we had made the proposal. It's here. There is one on here that I wish would have been my proposal. It is a very good idea, but we did not propose this, and that is working with one local grade school each fall. Whoever came up with it, great idea. Contemplated going forward, but this current fiscal year, I don't know if it'll be implementable. Let's put it that way. So what we're proposing is for fiscal year 25-26 to keep the budget as what it's typically been at about 65,000. Actually, we're proposing 65,165. And that is to do work at the unreclaimed site known as the Walkerville Playground. That name is a little disingenuous. It had a single personal swing set on it. It was not a Walkerville Park or a Butte Silver Bow Park, but due to the swing set, it was named a park. So that area has been since reclaimed and through the process. The other is Bella Butte. It has been through the process as well. And the third project for this year would be the Little Mina, which was a stormwater control enhancement project that we see really good opportunity to help eat up some of that water, if you will, by vegetation instead of sticking it into the system. And it is, all of these are fresh reclamation. And I kind of prefer to do this because then you are eliminating the competition of already established vegetation, making it more difficult for our investment to be successful. So, but going forward, with the IR/UR work and investigations still ongoing, we have proposed an annual budget for the remainder of the contract of $50,000 a year, and then we do them as they come online. We don't have any indication on how quickly this will go, but we do see the potential for one or two every season going forward and feel that the $50,000 would be ample to cover restoration activities on these at the time that any remedial enhancements or new remedy is implemented. So I really don't have a whole heck of a lot. I mean, that's what I have to bring before you tonight. I appreciate the time to speak to it. It does cut the $411,000 down to about $215,000. But if you have any questions, I'll feel free to answer any of them.
John from the council, is this Breeze? Is that still a program that's helping you guys identify why the
Breeze is the
program?
evaluation system for previously reclaimed areas.
And that's what you guys are working against now, or new reclaimed areas? I apologize, I'm just trying to.
Okay, so underneath the Butte consent decree, you have sites that were identified as unreclaimed. You had sites that were previously reclaimed that were identified as insufficiently reclaimed. So until these evaluations are done, we don't have a level of certainty that the investment can be protected in the forever. And we went down this road once before with an area that we called the Walkerville Triangle, where we did a very beautiful planting, got everything all up and growing, and the community decided to go a different direction and we had to remove it. That's a potential reimbursement that the county puts the county in a difficult spot to be able to do that. And we want to avoid that going forward, but we can't for 100% certainty avoid that until these evaluations are done. And the sites that we've identified for this upcoming planting season have been through that process, and we're as certain as you could possibly be in the world of Superfund that they're not going to be revisited and tore up again. So we feel very confident that the investment can be protected.
Thank you.
So the 3 sites that you named today, are those, will you work on those with Montana Tech?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We will be bringing
Big
proposals before the
collaboration.
council for each project in lockstep with Montana Tech's restoration program.
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, John says so. Walking playground and Little Minor, what was
The Bella Butte, it is
Bella
called. It is the northeastern portion of Walkerville. So it has a stormwater component and a soils remedy component. Good place to capture water through vegetation and keep it out of the system.
So are you, and this is Elizabeth Erickson. Are you looking at doing, so we were doing the community outreach projects. Are those kind of on hold then until we have?
Not necessarily. We'll kind of see, a couple of the sites aren't the best topographically. One maybe, but we need to do a further investigation and see how that pans out through the conversations with Robert and timing as well.
Okay.
So, but I don't want to see those go away either.
Yeah, those
They're
are
very
great.
fun. They kind of fit the one. I really would like to know who made that proposal on the schools, but this also kind of morphs into that. You have a lot of young children, a lot of families that show up for the community planting days, and I would not like to see that go away, but I'm not 100% confident in saying that we could put together one for 2025.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Suzanne Norwood. Hey, my question is on the Walkerville stuff. You know, the one, the triangle, I think that was done under a previous mayor, but nowadays when you're doing these projects in Walkerville, how do you communicate with the Walkerville mayor and the city council so that they know what's going on with it?
they're in conversations with us through the remedial process and lockstep as well. So, and these sites are sites that are reclaimed areas, and we, for lack of a better way to describe it, probably have a little bit more control over them than that particular triangle, because you also have the remedial aspect associated with it, and you have to make sure that they remain functioning, where the other one was really kind of an enhancement project, I'd say. It had no remedial component to it. It was a beautification process at best.
So basically, the mayor keeps abreast of what's going on. You guys don't go to the Walkerville City Council and present what you're doing.
No, and these lands will be Butte Silver Bows, not Walkerville's. So they'll be in control by Butte, ownership of Butte Silver Bows. So we keep them informed as to what we are doing in their township, and we've been doing that for decades.
Courtney?
Yeah, Courtney, you mentioned Robert, I presume that was Robert Powell.
Yes.
Is that correct? So it does mean that you are coordinating, collaborating with
Every project.
That is great.
Any other,
Question in the back?
no,
Still there? Okay.
any other questions from the council? Sister Mary Jo, did you have anything on this one?
No, thank you. Well, so if you're only using part of that grant that you already had, I'm assuming that the 3 years now takes it to the 10-year limit on what you had. So what happens with the remainder of that grant? I figured out it was $245,835.
Sister, this is Eric. I would be curious to hear what happens with the rest of that as well.
Doug, do you want to take that one?
This is Doug Martin. Yeah, so Sister Mary Jo, this is part of the looking at where the funding is and what's available to go to the projects that have been proposed. So as we talked about at the last meeting, the contract with Butte Silver Bow, the program looked at those as committed costs. Talking with Eric, he did believe that they could reduce those costs. So if Butte Silver Bow wants to reduce those costs, we could revise the contract to reduce those costs, and then through this amendment, we would reallocate those funds to other projects that you guys are recommending.
And Sister, this is Eric again, and I would rephrase that a little bit. We are willing to help with the costs associated. We're not asking to do this. This was a request to Butte Silver
Right,
Bow.
understand.
Like that clear and on the record that we were asked to conserve funding.
That's correct.
So we had made the attempt to conserve funding.
Eric, do you have what you need to finish the projects?
I feel we do in the time frame that's associated with the contract. With the contract time frame, yes, and that is again due to the insufficiently and unreclaimed work and us wanting to ensure that the investments are protected going forward. So as these things come online, they're not good. They don't come fast, Sister. We all know Superfund is somewhat time consuming, and I feel that at $50,000 after fiscal year 25, 26, that's about the pace we'll be able to work at and ensure the investment is safe going forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Bill Callahan, so looking at, if you, that $150,000 that you're requesting, we still have, a contract sum with you, $411,000. So when remedy is done and you guys are comfortable with the fact that you're not going to have to go back and redo that, there's going to be more veg work that you're going to have to do in the future. Is that correct?
Potentially, yeah, absolutely. But the contract time frame, I don't think we could expend the $411,000 safe.
Yeah.
So we have 3 years left, I believe, right, Doug? So I don't think in the 3 years that we could expend 411,000. And we think we could safely expand the 165.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, any other questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Eric.
Hello, Jim Ford, NRD. I'm going to talk about some of the adjustments we made for the projects that we've been talking about for a while here. So the first one I'm going to talk about is what we're calling the Alluvial Aquifer Restoration Project, the conceptual cost estimate. So as you may recall, we've got an existing system out there underneath this development parcel. This is like a subdrain system, you know, similar to the subdrain that's under the creek. These have manifolds and cleanouts. So this is an existing system that's there that we used. Remember, we did dewatering for that period of time between when the shops needed to be rebuilt and then demoed and moved over. There was about a 2-year lag in there, almost 2 years, and we used this system to dewater it. So that's existing in place. And this is the concept. So the original concept was a four-well component. These circles sort of represent the modeled capture zone. So based on the conductivity of the soils and the gradients and the flow of water, we used a model. It was a rough model, but it was still a model to look at what a four-well system did. So that was the original $2.5 million. So what we've done is reevaluate to a 3-well system. And the wells are the primary cost of it. There is a pump house and a discharge line, which we'll talk about. We think we can get similar coverage, not the same coverage. You know, what we were trying to achieve before was having any of this contaminated water leaving the site. So depending on how deep these wells are and how hard we pump them, that's the advantage of using wells, that you can vary your pumping, which you can't do with drain. But we could achieve some of the same goals. So the net effect of that, of course, it's one less well, right, out of 4. So it's like a 25% design. So this was the original estimate, 2.573 million. Again, this is a little dated. This goes back a couple of years, so costs have increased. But this is what we put together when we first talked about this a few years ago. So the 3-well system here is the same spreadsheet. The numbers in red are things that were adjusted. So primary ones were from 4 to 3 wells and the decrease in cost from that. There's decrease in cost of footage for conduit and wire control and pipe installation. The other main drivers that you need to be aware of, we had engineering and construction management. The assumption was originally 20% and 20% contingency. So we reduced that. I think if we design this as a bid package, so not do an official design and then do official bid package, the bid package would be the design that we could meet those constraints. So the other component that we looked at that we discussed last time, I just wanted to throw this up there. So this drops at about another $400,000 from 1.8 million to 1.4, was what would happen if we just ran this seasonally, like we did the system before. We don't bury the discharge line into the ground. So when we have it in the ground, we can run it year round. This would be the pipe laying on top of the ground, and then we could just run it seasonally. That does save $400,000. But again, you're not going to have the same capture because you're turning the system on and off, right? It's off for 4 or 5 months a year. But we talked about it before. So all the rest of the assumptions were the same, except I zeroed out this dual-walled pipe that needs to be jack and board, and that was it's a $400,000 component because it's $212 a foot. So I think that's all I had for that. Are there any questions?
This is Elizabeth. I've got a couple.
Sure.
So if we're going to the 3-well system, have we looked at, so what kind of a volume, like, let's say annually, is the removal?
Yeah, I can't tell you off the top of my head annually.
Okay.
I think we were looking at around 200 gallons a minute.
Okay.
that was our agreement previously with MR for taking the water. We never really pumped 200 gallons a minute,
Right,
but that was the cap on what they agreed to accept.
okay,
And so I think when we originally did the 4-well modeling and stuff, because I didn't do any modeling, right? I just used wells. But I think we were looking at about that
okay,
200. Now, again, this is all contingent. This costs all contingent on having an agreement with Montana Resources to take the water. If we had to deal with this contaminated water, this cost would be 6-8 times more. It would be unfeasible.
and they agreed to that?
Well, I mean, we'd have to work it out. We've discussed it with Mark Thompson a number of times, back when we first came up with this. I think we have a good relationship with them. He didn't see a problem with it.
Okay,
But no, we haven't taken it any further because we didn't know if it was a real project.
and then I guess my other question is, if we're pumping 200 gallons a minute, does that hold that groundwater divide? Or does it mess with
Yeah,
that?
we'd have to figure that out.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't know. The groundwater divide was the big issue. It's back up here. They got rid of that pond here, what do they call it? Environmental pond or something. You remember the one that was right near the road a decade ago and stuff? That moved the thing. So I don't know how it would affect that. And I don't know if BP and MR are still debating. That was never really an issue of ours. We'll change the flow regime. We're trying to change the flow regime. And right now, BP does have a functioning, I think, fairly robust groundwater model. So they could utilize the data we have and look at effects. Now, the net effect is all this highly contaminated water, which is the primary source of clogging their subdrain, is now not going down. So they're getting benefit from this. So I think they'll acknowledge that. And so I think they'll be more than willing to work with us if we keep this contaminated water from messing with the subdrain, flowing down the hill, going into the creeks, all that kind of stuff. And again, this is like we discussed before. It's, I don't know how to phrase it, an interim project. We would do this as long as we're getting really highly contaminated water. And once the concentrations go down to some point, we turn it off. It doesn't make sense.
So, Suzanne, Northern Council. So my question is, and I know you just discussed the general concept, but depending on the contamination, there's value there that MR might pull out. And besides that, then there's that, I don't know where this goes into their system, but does this free up any other water? That sort of both then use someplace else from the Summer Lake system, the industrial water system.
Yeah, they use a lot of water up there, so 200 gallons is not even there. But, if this was before we had discussions with them, when we were taking the water over there, and it was a short duration, it was a construction project, just a couple of years. And they didn't want to take this water all the way up to where they leach it through the scrap metal. Yeah, but that's not to say if we had something like this, maybe it'd be worthwhile. I mean, it's quite a distance up there. We're not budgeted to do that, but it's maybe something that they would work with us and say, well, we see value there. We would extend your system instead of taking this to their process pond, take it on higher.
So I guess follow up. So are you saying if they pay for the fucking costs, then that might compensate whatever value they'll receive from it?
Or if they just pay for to pipe it up where they want to treat it. I don't know. We had this conversation about the removal of the waste and then putting it through their crushing plant and stuff. And these soils would have just clogged stuff. It's not rock, it's old soils and stuff. I don't think they saw any value in it. And we know that because they didn't take it. We just put it in a pile up there. But we would talk with them about it. Again, they were great to work with during the Parrot project, very flexible, very reactive and able to make decisions. So I would suspect, if we were to work through this project with them, we could find solutions for some of these things.
And one of the things that came up the last time we talked about this, because this conversation came up before when we were doing the Parrot removal, and it was like the cost to take this water somewhere else and treat it is so much more than any, little incremental value that they get from, capturing the copper from the water that comes up there, that it's really a cost benefit analysis that was weighted on our side, for
Yeah.
sure.
I just think that we should take, sorry,
No, go.
but we should take, we should take credit for, or whatever, we should have some acknowledgement back to the program that we did this good for the community, or whatever we're doing. Like, just like they're doing good for us, but we're providing, to some extent, so, they're not doing us a total favor, they're getting a little bit, some, I guess, maybe, if they could. Sorry.
Yeah, this is Courtney Young. Is there, you kind of said no already, but there's not been any mass balance of copper, how much gets pumped up there and how much Montana Resources would recover.
No, we haven't done that yet. I mean, we did do that in previous discussions with them. And it was more related to the waste, the copper in the soils. But it just became a process issue with them. They just could not process the old floodplain soils and the clays and stuff. But the water is a lot easier calculations. And so if it's something that they would consider taking and utilizing and stuff, we could look into what that is. We did do mass balance calculations of pounds leaving the site in groundwater. It wouldn't be that hard to do the inverse of what we're pumping. But we haven't done any of that. Again, we costed this out. We did some simple modeling and stuff. And then we put down tools on this, 4 years ago.
A couple of, I'm asking a lot of different questions because what I'm trying to understand, first of all, what's the source of the copper? We don't seem to be removing that copper. We're just removing the contaminated groundwater that's going to be there in perpetuity.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the source was all the material that we removed. So we have data, hard data on what was excavated and then what was left in place. This is the residual, the contaminated groundwater that's there is the residual from that source that's been removed.
So that it will go to zero and it should stay at zero, give or take.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd use the word number zero, but yes, and we have seen concentrations go down already. We've got extensive monitoring network down gradient of this. We have seen concentrations go down. They're still incredibly high, right? This water has a lot more contaminants in it than the Berkeley pit. So they're still high, but we expect, since we removed the source, we invested that money, that the concentrations at some point, I can't say if it's 3 years from now or 5 or 10, they're going to start nosediving off. But we think there's no other source there because we sampled the bottom of the excavations. We know that, and the only elevated concentrations we had were some zinc. Copper was all gone. Everything else was gone. There was zinc, and zinc's fairly mobile in groundwater environments.
Okay. As long as the source is removed, and I was there for ribbon cutting and all that other stuff, this is actually quite nice. I saw some of the activity with the removal and all the shoveling, etc. So if it's going to be finite, then maybe sometime down the road, there would be an opportunity to put that plumbing somewhere else, on some other site, or dispose of it, or whatever. But if Montana Resources is willing to sit down and chat about these things, I wouldn't mind being at the table, but just to help with the conversation. These are things I do.
Yeah. Well, certainly. I think, and there are people out there, there's, experts are gone a dozen who, a lot of times on surplus sites, you wouldn't, if the source was too big, you don't even remove the source and you just do containment. It's called containment, right? And you're just controlling that contaminated groundwater. The problem is that goes on forever. In a real spot, this was the opportunity to actually remove the source. Now we still got residual contamination, but that should go away quickly. And so there'll be people like, well, why didn't you just do that all along? Just pump it. all the time and never, then spend the money digging it out. But I think that's really short-sighted. And some sites, that's all you can do. This just, we didn't think was one of them.
What do we, I mean, you mentioned ARCO and maybe others or BP knows, what's the source of the groundwater then?
Where does it come from?
Yeah,
Well, there's sort of, as Elizabeth mentioned, there's a divide up here. And the north side of that divide, it's all flowing to the pit, right? The south side, it's all coming down here. And this is the alluvial system we're talking about, the alluvial, not bedrock. And it goes all the way down to the creek. So it's precipitation, infiltration, all within this watershed here is the source.
so it's seasonal.
The flow regime changes seasonally, yep. Water elevations change seasonally. It's a little dynamic, but with wells, we can control that. That's the problem with using these drains or the subdrain below the creek. Once the water's at the level of that drain, you really don't have any control. With the wells, we can pump them harder, less. We can control these cones of influence. But those are all the details that a design would have to figure out.
And the reason for asking that question is if you turn your pumps off for the winter, I'm not necessarily a fan of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I understand from the perspective, it's a lower cost type situation. The plumbing is above ground, close to being at the ground level. I mean, I get that.
Yeah, and we have experience and data with that because when we were doing the construction, dewatering to remove these wastes, our system was on the ground surface and we turned it off. We could see how this came back, you know, how the flow regime, we turned off the drains and stuff and how it come back up. But since we talked about it before, I thought I would throw up that spreadsheet of this is how much it saves. I mean, it's 400,000. I'm not diminishing that amount, but it's compared to having control year round versus seasonal control. I think it's, you know, it's a big benefit.
Any other questions? John?
So I'm curious to hear, have you, this sort of walks and talks like a remedial action to me, and have you approached Atlantic Richfield about doing this under remedy or with their help?
We did a number of years ago. We haven't lately because, you know, this sort of has come back up as a potential project, you know, just here in the last year. So we did actually have some meetings with them on this. And to their credit, they did not say, no, we don't want to participate in that. They just were sort of focused on, you know, finding a repository, getting their project started. So one of the first, I think, tasks would be to re-engage BP and talk about how is this going to work with your other actions, right? Because down at the bottom of the system, they're capturing water at Blacktail Creek. They have that requirement under the CD, and they're doing it over at the Butte reduction works. So maybe we can work this all together, and maybe they would participate because they are receiving benefit. I mean, I think they would even acknowledge that they're receiving benefit, that it's way better to capture your worst groundwater at its source than to let it flow down the hill and try to find it and capture it. Right? It's easier and more effective. Now, what that participation would look like, I don't expect them to like bring a checkbook right away, but that doesn't mean over time that we can figure out a way it all works together.
Well, I would hate to expend the NRDP VAO money when there may be other players that would participate in that cause.
No, that's an excellent point. I think that would be one of the first tasks is to sit down with them and see if they could, and we could reduce the cost even further. That was partially the pitch originally, that they would financially participate in the project. That we would do the work, we could do it cheaper than them, quicker than them, all that kind of stuff, and that they would pay part. We never got to the point of talking about any, we showed them the estimates of cost, that $2.5 million. But we never got to the point of talking like percentages or if they would really, any of that. But we would re-engage that. And if we could get their financial participation, we would reduce the cost of it.
Madam Chair, I know this is probably a difficult assessment to make, but if you mentioned earlier that you're already seeing some improvement of the water, and can you quantify if we spend $2 million or $1.8 million, how much you would expedite the cleansing of the water downstream, down underground? I mean, I have been told that, it's a matter of decades, and a project like this wouldn't move the needle much.
Yeah, I don't think that the data supports that. I think if you look at so that's the concept that the aquifer is all contaminated. It's releasing, contamination. The stuff originated here is flown with the groundwater and recontaminated the aquifer. Well, we have hundreds, maybe even thousands of data points here at the bottom of our excavation, and it shows the concentrations are not that high. There's some zinc at like 1,000. Most things are in the hundreds. We have groundwater at 200,000. So I don't think there's this big residual source down there. I don't think there's any data that supports that. There might be ideas or wishes or whatever. We could do some calculations, but you understand there's a lot of assumptions when you try to do, like, you're trying to predict the future, how quickly. But what we can do is if we say, okay, if this runs 5 years at these sorts of concentrations, at this sort of declining curve, we can say, how many thousands of pounds of copper or zinc or arsenic or cadmium that we have removed. We can do that pretty simply. Predicting like when you get to much cleaner water, not zero water, but cleaner. That's there's a lot of variability in those sorts of calculations, but I mean, that's the nut of the question, though. Yeah.
It seems to be pretty expensive I'm just questioning the cost, the overall cost.
Yeah, I will say, John, that I don't think there's any data-based analysis. We have data from the wells, those transects, we have transects downhill here. And we've seen concentrations come up. Statistically speaking, like just last 2 years, I mean, that may seem long to us since we finished it, but in groundwater, contaminated groundwater census, that's pretty fast. Yeah.
I get it. I mean, we removed the source and now we're seeing improvement.
Yeah.
I just don't know that we're going to have that much more improvement in the big picture in terms of time when that water would be considerably cleaner and over how many years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I've been sort of vague, like how long you get the real steep declines in concentrate. It's 5 years, it's 7 years, 10 years, I don't know, but I think that's the scale we're talking about. We're not talking, 40 years. I don't think there's any basis for that. I think that's complete conjecture.
Any other questions?
Sure.
Go ahead.
My name is Mark Garth. I'm a citizen of Butte. I have some questions about this. So you say, this site was just remediated 2 years ago, big ribbon cutting, got it was great. But you're saying that there's residual contamination still there. Well, I wasn't around, I wasn't paying enough attention back then, but why is it still there? Was it just you couldn't physically get all of it, or I guess the question is, why is there residual contamination if the site was just remediated?
Yeah, so it wasn't remediated. I mean, it's a sleight of hand terms. We used restoration money, but it was a net effect of remedial action. What we did was remove all the contaminated soils. So the project wasn't to, the indirect benefit of that was the groundwater, but it was to remove soils, not to remove contaminated groundwater. Now, we did remove a lot of contaminated groundwater because we had to dewater the base of these excavations. So that was sort of a de facto thing, but it wasn't directly to address contaminated groundwater. So now all these soils in here met our cleanup criteria, our numeric criteria. Now we have the residual groundwater contamination.
Okay, so, I mean, I guess I agree with Sean Sesso. This sounds like somebody else should be on the hook for this, not the BNRC.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole history, John knows it as well as anybody. You know, we have a consent decree.
Right.
And the Parrot tailings was excluded from the consent decree. It was always the state's position, not NRD's position, but the state of Montana's, that this should be cleaned up. There was an agreement made, and we used state money to do this project. Now there's the State Department of Environmental Quality is doing a project on Blacktail Creek. It was overpaid for. The residuals from that project are supposed to backfeed the funds that paid for this in part, right? So there was this larger decision made about who was doing what. And we were tasked with performing this. So yes, I mean, I'm not going to argue that there isn't benefit to BP and BP EPA's actions, and I would think that we'd sit down with them and talk about it and see how we can have them participate, knowing those benefits. And if that reduces costs, great.
Yes, go ahead, Eric.
Eric, if you sort of, well, I'm just curious, Jamie, if any of the analysis that, what potential does this have to move the groundwater body, or if any?
Yeah, I mean, when we did the dewatering before, we didn't really see any effect. I mean, there's limited wells up there on MR's property, and nobody wanted to put more wells up there to see because, you know, MR and BP were in a debate about where this divide is and whatever their purposes was. So there's only a limited number of wells there. I think that pumping all the way down here, there would be minimal effect, and that's something that we could monitor. If they've settled their disagreement, we could put an additional monitoring well or two up there and look at it. But we didn't see a lot of impact to it before. You know, the divide used to be way down here when there was the ecological pond. And it's moved quite a bit. That has to do with getting rid of that ecological pond, you know, a decade ago.
Thank you for that extra. I was wondering, because I've always been shown that.
Well, some people used to show it down here. It was never down here. It was never here. Yeah. That pond is a big recharge source, right? And so it was sort of like a boundary.
Thank you.
Sure. I have one more question, Mark. So Jim, you mentioned that you need Montana Resources to agree to take this water. Is part of your cost estimate piping the water up there or pumping it?
Yeah, that's what we had before. We had a double walled pipe laid out, went under both roads here, and then they have their process pond about right up in here. So we discharged it right to their process pond. This would be a buried pipe up there. But yeah, that's a big cost. Not only for the pipe, but the big cost, we have these wells, but we also have to manifold them into a single pump house and then pump the water. And again, this water is like a pH like 4.4, 4.5. So it's acidic, so it eats up pumps, and there's all these other considerations. But yeah, that's a big driver of the cost. But once it gets that pond, that's a lime addition pond stuff. So low pH, that's no problem for MR to handle. But like was brought up by Suzanne and stuff, maybe they might want to take it up to their leach facilities where they're leaching scrap metal. But again, that would be something that they decide. We're not costed for that. We don't, would be a sizable additional expense. Because it's quite a distance in elevation.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Courtney.
Courtney Young again. I'm just curious, Do you think Montana Resources might share the costs? And, I mean, not share the cost, but share the profits? Sometimes arrangements get done that way where I'll take 50%, you get 50%, but I'll get it to you. They take care of it.
I mean, anything's possible. We can certainly talk with them. You know, they were, I mean, they did a lot of things for us on the Parrot project to make that a cost-effective project. They gave us a lot of 600,000 cubic yards of free fill, in fact, and stuff. So they've been a good partner, so we can certainly talk with them about it. They are a mining company, so.
Well, it definitely changed that, you know, that we're doing, using restoration dollars for remediation to pay this up.
Yeah. Again, this is in the BIPSU operable unit, but there was no required activities up here for BP.
Suzanne Margaret, but yeah, but general members of the public don't understand.
Yeah, no, it takes, I mean, it's confusing for people that even do this. It's confusing. So I can understand how the public can be totally confused about it. But that would be sort of an educational component of, you know, again, why are we doing this with our money if we were to move something like this forward? That's why I think there'd be advantages to getting BP to participate, getting MR, getting everybody who's getting some benefit to participate in the project.
All right. Eric has a question online. Go ahead, Eric.
Hey, Elizabeth. Yeah, I just wanted to point out one thing. I mean, since this is Butte Silverboat property and it's still within an operable unit and has the principal contaminants concern related to the circle listing, if this isn't addressed, Butte Silverboat wouldn't be able to access brownfield funding. Where if it is addressed and certified as claimed, they could access brownfield programs to redevelop the property. I just wanted to point that out.
Good point.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about it.
If I may, we've been down that process with potential resiliency hub, and it was looked at through the soil lens, so not a water, and it was eligible for Brownsfield already at this point. So the recent proposal for the resiliency hub, the drop evaluation.
Is that something, is there like a document or get something from EPA on that, Eric?
We would have to reach out to the, or it's like a 7-letter acronym requirement there, but it was a determination that they made off of documentation that you guys provided from your contractor. So, but again, that was just through the soils lens. That was not through the water lens. So I don't know, due to the fact that there's infrastructure there, I would assume that the water component wasn't necessarily part of that Brownsfield evaluation.
Okay.
All right. Now are we good? Go ahead. Thanks to the next. Now I'm good. The laugh was correct.
All right, Doug Martin with the Natural Resource Damage Program. One comment I will make about all the projects we just got done talking about is pretty much most of them are conceptual except for Zane's water meter project. So, you know, the cost estimates I would, state I know ours are conservative. So you don't have to come back for more. So, you know, there is a potential for cost savings on all of these projects. And I think, you know, the partners have shown that, and you know, some of the conversations we've had here about, you know, can MR participate, can ARCO participate? You know, I think, you know, all of those avenues, at least with this last project, would be explored and you know, try to be as cost effective. What I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about the top section here. These are the committed costs, and you do have this in front of you as well. So the column A here is the Butte remedial restoration coordination. where we had initially estimated about $300,000 to participate in the Butte CD. Part of that, in the remedial designs process, part of that estimation on our part included looking at the Blacktail Creek remedial work that DEQ is doing. Part of our analysis of that, and I mentioned it last time, is that the Blacktail Creek project, 51% of the funds that come back actually go to the Upper Clark Fork. So one of our looks at it is, why is the Butte Area 1 fund paying for all of that work? We have, charged Butte Area 1 for a lot of that in the past. What we are looking at is, going forward, is actually charging that time, and we are currently we've been doing it for the last several months, charging that time to the aquatics program of the Upper Clark Fork River Basin. So with this $300,000, we did reduce that by $150,000 for our time to work on the Butte CD and track that and make sure that the consent decree is followed there. The Montana Tech Nursery and the Native Plant Program, we left the same. That is the contract that Robert Paul came here and talked to you about last time in May. The number C here, Eric talked about that. I did put in a number of 150 there, as Eric said today. We will change it on a spreadsheet that we have that Jim will bring up, and we can change that so it's live. That's supposed to be 165 from what he had proposed. As far as our administrative costs, there was quite a bit of talk about that last time. We did look at that and proposed to, it was 12% in June. We proposed to move it to 9.5%. That would reduce it by approximately $150,000. I still, and Miranda still have a concern of closing out this. We can't go below zero in this fund for our cost. So we are concerned about that. I would put a contingency on this, and it does say it right here in the last line. It assumes that interest would be available to back up this if for some reason our administrative costs were more than that 9.5%. Just that to make sure that we can't go below zero.
Question there. So you're asking for that 9.5% in this fund request for the rest of the life of all of the budget, regardless for how long it takes?
Yes.
So you'll never come back again and ask for this?
No, what we're saying is that we need to reserve 9.5% for our administrative fees for this amount of money, this $5.59 million. That's based on Miranda's analysis of how much the administrative fees will be to expend this down to zero. That's what we're looking at for this number here.
So quick question on that. So if we don't spend all of the money, then what does it do to that number?
Correct. So, yes. So if we leave $500,000 in there, we will not, that number should not be, it'll be a percentage. So yes, it's only
Percentage of what?
whatever's left in this fund.
So 4.4.
Yeah, if we just were dealing with the committed costs, it would be, if we just, no, not 4.4, John.
What number?
So our administrative fees are a portion of the total number in the BAO fund. And this number here, this was 12% of that number. The $530,000 is 9.5% of the BAO fund.
So I think maybe building on Elizabeth's question, if we push pause tonight, except for the A, B, and C.
Right.
What's the number? If we push pause, we're not coming back for 10 years. What's the number?
9.5% of what's spent.
So 9.5% of 300 of $618,000. Because that's the 3 projects.
Yes. Yeah, over whatever the duration is.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So these are the committed funds. So we have gone back and looked at that. So in June, for stand out of the way, in June, we had $1.7 million of committed funds. We're assuming $1.5 million of committed funds now. That does leave an additional, so there's $4.4 million that could go to projects, if you look at this table. After the analysis that we have gone through tonight, with various programs providing different amounts of money or reducing costs. We did, for the alluvial pumping, we did choose the $1.8 million option. We do believe that is a better or a higher cost benefit to help protect the aquifer and the down gradient streams. We would leave the Blacktail Creek investigation at the 250. The Blacktail Creek Restoration Project was still at 100. And all of these numbers can be talked about. $20,000 for the memorial at the Parrot. We put in the dollar amount for Butte Silver Bow's meter at $850,000. At this point in time, I didn't have the number for Shawn and the rec project, so that was still at 88. What those projects total come to is right at $5 million. So this $5 million, or the project total comes to $3.9 million. And there is, with these cost savings, 4.4 available. So there's about $500,000 that would still be available that could be allocated to another project if we wanted to do that. But right now, with the work that I would thank the partners for working on this and coming forward with some revisions to help make some things happen. There is enough money to fund all the projects as are shown here or as you would like to modify. And we do have a spreadsheet that Jim can work on live. If you guys want to change these numbers, that will show how adding money to, for instance, the water meters, or taking something off, how that will affect the bottom line.
So maybe this is getting into our next item, but
It does.
Yeah.
But that's okay if we move forward.
Yes, let's see where we go.
So what of those projects does NRDP think if we did them, we would need a plan amendment? And what could we do without a plan amendment?
No, why don't you leave it there, Jim? I'll just point to that one. So on the first sheet, it does say what would require a plan amendment. If we were just doing this top row, these committed costs with no plan amendment for that. If we wanted to just do that, hit pause. There's no plan amendment there. If you were to do just the enhancement at Basin Creek, that would not require a plan amendment because there's $1 million in that category. It doesn't need. If you were just to do the Blacktail Creek projects, either one or both, that would not require a plan amendment because there's enough money in that category to do those. The municipal water and the PAO alluvial pumping would require moving money around, and the amount that needs to be moved is it's 10% of the original allocation for a significant amount. So $1.8 million. There was originally $10 million in the restoration of Upper Silver Bow Creek, which was your mine waste removal category. 1.8 is more than that, but we would have to do a plan amendment for that. For the municipal water, we'd have to add, move some money into that. The 850 is less than the 10%. So we wouldn't have to do a plan amendment if that's all we were doing there. I would propose to you that you would, if you are to propose something, that you make a recommendation and let the governor's office know what you're proposing. And the public, I don't think that would be a positive thing. But yeah, there's many of these things now that we could do without a major.
So the water meter one, because it came back at 850 now, and that is less.
That is less than the 10%, yes. So that is different than last time we were here, we had a yes there because it was
Yeah.
1.7.
So that one would be a no.
Yes. Yeah, so it was over the.
Madam Chair. So a question, observation, I don't know, just sort of a displeasure on this. Okay, so we look at something that's great. Thank you for sharpening the pencil. Let's start with a thank you. Thanks for sharpening the pencil. But here's what we've got. So if you go to line item C, which is actually planning things on the Butte Hill, you cut 64% of that budget. If you go to line item 5 and proposed projects below, which is actually saving water in Butte, you cut 52% of that project. If you go to line item D, which is paying you guys in Helena, you only cut 21% of the budget. There's a distaste there you have to hear. This is work for our community, not paying you guys in Helena. You need to hear that you didn't do a good enough job on line D.
Well, John, we did what we could on line D. Under the restoration plan, this program is to be paid out of the Butte Area 1 fund. It's the same thing we do for all of our restoration plans. This is how we get paid. We don't have any general fund money. In the consent decree and in the restoration plan, there are specifics about how we will get paid by this.
What were those percentages and those specifics?
What's that?
In the restoration plan, what's the
There
percentage?
was not a percentage in the restoration plan.
Because in the restoration plan on page 24 and 25, 2007 BNRC plan, it says that the Butte coordinator is the one to account for these funds. No one in Helena is called out.
It does say in the restoration plan that the Helena office will be support for this. The Butte coordinator does not have the administrative ability to manage the administrative accounts.
You want me to read you the document? It says
I've read it, John.
Okay. Okay, so then I'll move on. Thank you. But it's a pretty big distaste when we see money being taken away from what's supposed to happen with this money, clean up our community, to more money being taken out of those pots than is being taken out of the administrative costs. And you need to hear that. So
I appreciate the comment. The comment heard. We reduced that to the extent that we felt we could.
John?
Can you clarify for me, again, that 531 number? That's pure administrative / overhead. Now, if we were to say, let's do the Basin Creek Park improvements because it doesn't require a plan amendment, and we do the 2-year pilot on the meters / grants program, and maybe whatever, we do 2 or 3 of these projects. But the staff cost to process the contracts, provide project oversight would be in addition to the 531, or is it part of the 531?
It would be part.
And to follow up on that, it would be less than the 531 because it would be the cost of the stuff above plus that. It'd be 9.5% of that, of the money that we were spending. Is that correct?
So this is what we talked about back in when Miranda came down in May or April. Our costs are based on the amount of time we spend on a project. So in the past, when we've spent, when Butte Silverbow was building the Basin Creek Water Treatment Plant, $10 million that went there, that was a $30 million project. The cost that it wasn't a $10 million expenditure. Jim's time, for instance, at the Parrot, a $30 million project there was a whole lot more time than Pat spent on reviewing Butte Silverbow's water. So it really depends on what projects are selected and what projects we're working on. If we're doing this alluvial project, we're going to have staff working on that. If the only thing we're doing is the meter project, Zane and Butte Silverbow are going to be doing on that. We have a very good working relationship with Butte Silverbow and their administrative and contracts folks. They provide us, they've been doing it since 2001, providing us invoices to pay bills. So they know what to provide. That doesn't take a lot of our staff time. So depending on what projects are selected, our staff workload will be less. Wrong way to say that. Should have said it. Elizabeth, John.
Oh, sorry.
So another thing that I'm, this is sort of a simplistic analysis of the flow of money. Because, like, for example, in your first column, row A, that's over a 3-year period. Row B is over a several-year period, where there's only a percentage of that amount is going to be expended in a given year. Row 3, or row C, Eric said $155,000 a year within the current time frame, but that's 55 a year more so than the 165 that should be put in that box. And you've indicated that the 531 is also temporally based in the sense of that will be expended not necessarily in the next 12 or even 24 months. It'll be expended over the life of the remaining dollars or additional dollars that come back to the BAO. Likewise, the project from the Butte Silverbow project for the meters is now a 2-year project rather than an immediate expenditure. And even the park project is going to be expended. I'm assuming that's just like all the rest. It's going to be a cost reimbursement project, and once they spend the money, then they'll get reimbursed based on justified invoices. So during the period, this 2, 3, 4-year window, you're also going to be earning money on the top line, 5.5 million. And so there's actually a better cash flow and cash availability perspective than the way this is presented. And I know this is presented for our discussion purposes tonight, but I just point out to everybody that we're going to be spending this money over time, and that accrues to the benefit of doing more work with the dollars we have available. So, and when I look at it, and I appreciate the fact that your the 150,000 on that top line, the A, and you're building if you're going to be talking about this 51%, and I want to get too far into that again tonight, but it seems right that if you're going to spend that time to oversee the connection between remedy and restoration, that it should be shared among the 3 categories, not just the BAO, and that improves our situation as well. So I'm I'm a little more bullish about being able to afford, get a couple of projects going. I'm glad to hear if we do get a couple of projects going, that, there won't be an additional cost over the 531. And I guess maybe under other business use, we can talk about what is the plan for replacing, having your presence back in Butte, at some point relative to, the PAC position as we are calling it. But regardless, Madam Chair, I just think there's probably more flexibility here than meets the eye on this discussion chart.
It's a good point. This is, multiple years and some of these numbers and, yeah, I think that's a good thing to point out. Questions?
Madam Chair, I haven't, I don't know why I'm not in favor of this project, but, I haven't seen any detail on this $250,000 line, road. Excuse me, road 2 here. It just seems like sort of a general number that's been thrown out there to study Blacktail Creek some more, and I haven't seen any budget on that. Is there something you put together, or is that just again, as Jim put it out earlier, they're all kind of conceptual numbers, except for the ones that the proposal presented, but what's going on there?
So that is a conceptual number, that is based on, and Jim speak up, that's based on, past investigations that the program has led at Diggings East and West Side, East Side Taylor.
Well, yeah, we did, it's based primarily on the cost for that study, John, we did a Blacktail Creek and Blacktail Creek, berm area. We also studied BRW. So we did in-stream sediment, sediment pore water, surface water, groundwater, and then floodplain soils. So we had some data points up in this area that we're talking about. We're talking about west side soils. But those data points were the background points for our study area. We didn't study them. And so this is based on the costs that we incurred for that. But again, this can be a continuum. Like you could do $150,000 study. It wouldn't be a $250,000. It would be less robust or less media types and stuff, but that's the basis for it. But I've never put together like a spreadsheet that it's going to be 300 samples of this, 200 samples of this, the analytical costs and the collection costs and that kind of stuff.
I'm troubled by the lack of specificity there and asking us to sort of endorse that project. I don't know what the results would be. What are we going to learn that we don't already know? And is it also correct that the BAO funds have already been spent on a conceptual plan for improvements for the reaches between Father Sheehan Park and the Blacktail Confluence Project as we know it to be Lexington Street?
Yeah, so there was a conceptual plan that went from the end of the Blacktail project all the way up through the golf course. There was a conceptual plan that was developed, I believe it was 2013. Right. But it was a conceptual design of how to restore that. It did not look at contamination. It was just, so the surveys that were done were just at, what could you do with the stream corridor here? What type of how could you restore that channel, that floodplain through there? We did not look at contamination in that stuff.
And well, I can see that point, but why wouldn't we start looking at projects in that corridor?
Well, and
rather than studying it some more.
Well, this would be the first step in it because the samples that we had collected as background show there was contamination. And there's concern that, we don't want to propose a project that, we're running in and once again, doing remedial activity. We'd rather do the investigation if there's contamination there, since it's part of west side soils, tried to get EPA to get that cleaned up, much like Diggings East, PRW, and the West Side soils.
Yeah, so John, you know, the creek up there is above standards. It's
Right.
run up.
And we know this to be true.
Yeah, well, some of us do. It's not widely recognized by EPA. What they did, a risk assessment, we have comments on their risk assessment on our website. About years ago, they did a risk assessment, averaging samples from the Highland with one sample in town and averaging them all out and saying that it's not problematic. It is problematic. Now, you know, West Side Soils as an operable unit is way behind BPSU, right? So they still have to do a lot of figuring out stuff. But what we were trying to point out in our analysis using the previously collected data was, no, you have exceedances of surface water, you have sediment contamination, you have floodplain contamination. Something needs to be done here, right? That was the predicate reason why they got a waiver in BPSU, was because the water already coming into BPSU was over the standards, right? Yeah, you know that, right? So this effort, just like we did, you know, EPA refused to collect data at BRW, at Blacktail Creek, at Diggings East, at Northside Tailings, is we're saying, here's data, you've got to deal with this problem. Now, that doesn't mean that we couldn't combine some restoration efforts, but they have to figure out what they're going to do remedial ones. Because there's stormwater outfalls there, right? Stormwater doesn't start becoming contaminated at Lexington Avenue. There's other places it's contaminated.
Right. I'm just reluctant to invest $10 to beat them over the head again for what we already have is said, hey, this is a problem, you got to do something about it. And then they keep saying, well, we're not, you know, they keep procrastinating and, you know, what I perceive is we're going to spend more money trying to tell them again. And we already know what's contaminated and we know there's a problem. It's common knowledge and it doesn't seem like we're going to do any good by studying in some more, but that's just me.
No, I can appreciate and understand the frustration with it, having to spend money to do it. I've felt it, and a lot of you have felt it all through the years, the other studies. But it did work really well in BPSU. It did work.
It did.
Yeah, and so, but I understand, like, this is state's money, and why should we have to be doing what should be obvious? Now, West Side Soils has a new RPM. Emma Roth's going to be the RPM there. She called me this morning. So maybe it'll be a new day of more collaborative work with them, and maybe they'll chip in for collecting data, just like we were talking about with BP. You know, individuals can make a big difference in Superfund. So I understand the frustration.
And one of the things, John, excuse me, this is Doug, but one of the things, you know, for $250,000 or $200,000, wherever, you know, if we decide to spend that, to get data to show that it needs to get cleaned up and get it cleaned up is a whole lot cheaper than if it was just the remedy left in place, i.e. the Parrot, and then restoration dollars for it to have to come in and clean it up. That would be millions of dollars. So that is, you know, yes, we are spending restoration dollars to get remedy to do more, but that's what we had to do at times throughout this case.
And see, I would say, Chair Johnson, so I would suggest that an avenue I would pursue is going to DEQ, who's holding the biggest bag of money, and get them to do that investigation.
Yeah, but those are consent decree dollars specific to their project.
And then lastly, just so we have covered them all, this $100,000 that in line 3,
Right.
What is your expectation of this council? The best I could tell is what now you told me that tonight you're going to go to bid next week. You're going to get a real number, and you're going to find out compared to how much money you have, whether you're short or you're on here, everything is scope setting, then we wouldn't need that 100,000
Potentially, yeah.
potentially. And, have you had any luck with any additional grants to fill the gap, since we spoke last, or do you anticipate any additional dollars coming in from other sources so that number could go down?
We, from the last meeting, we have had no additional funds. Did we know about the 2019 last meeting?
I
I don't know, but we did not get any pre-19.
Matching funding, John, is drying up
Yeah.
pretty quickly.
So at this point in time, we have not. But you are correct, if that number, if we put out a bid and it came in for what the upper Clark Fork could cover, the upper Clark Fork's gonna cover.
And would there be any, because in my view, the aquatic program, the original allocation for Blacktail to be kind of the aquatic program should be paying for that. We didn't change the numbers for all the tributaries, not just Blacktail Creek, but for all the priority tributaries outlined in the 2013 plan. Is there a mind of you guys as leadership of the NRD program to be recommending in 2027, when you update the aquatic plan again, that you will be redoubling efforts to replenish the original dollar allocations for each of those priority streams?
So during each of the amendments, we have modified how much money has gone into each of the watersheds. In 2018, we added $200,000 to the Blacktail Creek watershed. And during the 2023, 24 amendment, we did not add money to that watershed. We added money to other watersheds. We took money out of other watersheds. We took $500,000 out of the Little Blackfoot watershed because we're not spending money there. So every time we do a modification, we look at where we are spending money, where there is a need, and we are trying to make sure that we're putting money where it needs to go. Blacktail Creek in 2023, we missed that. That was not our partners, us. We did not come up with a need there.
Right, but if we were to use some BAO money to fill the gap, if there is a gap, and we'll know next month. My reasoning is, well, we're not going to at this juncture. Then we will have expended all of the original dollars in the Blacktail Creek original allocation. We're actually over budget by a couple $100,000. So are we basically writing off then the use of any additional aquatic plan dollars for Blacktail Creek because we exceeded the amount?
No. Every time we do a revision, when we look at each of those watersheds, we look at, are there other priority projects that need to be completed there that are going to help us meet those goals? And if there is a need, if there is funding available, we would allocate additional funding to those watersheds. But at the same token, if there's watersheds where we're not spending money, and we're, for some reason, there's some, a reason that we can't, can't spend money there, we're not letting that money sit there. We're moving that money to other watersheds where it can be used.
So I would just hope that there'd be a corollary between the expenditure of BAO dollars on the Blacktail, on a reach of Blacktail Creek that was designated for aquatic dollars, and that we would demonstrate that there's a need to put more money in the Blacktail Creek tributary account for additional projects on Blacktail Creek.
Well, I would suspect that Blacktail Creek, much like a number of other watersheds where we do or have had a good foothold in those watersheds and they have been implementing projects, that there would be a need for additional projects or additional funding to do more projects. So those various watersheds where we are actually doing a lot of work so Blacktail Creek is one of those that in the past they got more money.
So kind of corollary to what John was saying, in the next plan update, could there be money allocated to Blacktail Creek for further projects within that. And could, in the corridor that we're talking about from Father Sheehan to Lexington? Yeah. And you just look at those based on priority.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we're asking for a crystal ball here, but do you foresee that in that next plan, this would be something that would rise to the top for more funding?
I would foresee the fact that Blacktail Creek has been an active watershed, that there would be a request for and a need for dollars there. I'm not going to guarantee anything. But, a lot has to do with what's going on in other watersheds. I know, one of the watersheds that Jim works on is the Little Blackfoot River, and I believe there's about $1 million in that watershed. We have had very little success of getting projects there. And, we have, during the last revision, $500,000 out of that watershed and allocated it to other watersheds where there is more going on. So, then there's the interest in the aquatics that can be allocated. So there will be funding in the aquatics that can go to other watersheds. I'm not going to guarantee you, Elizabeth, but I do think that there is a potential for dollars to go to Blacktail Creek in this reach, in association with, some of the stuff that DEQ is doing upstream. Even up in Gulf Port.
In association to the restoration plan that was put together, is there?
I think that is going to have to depend a lot on that Blacktail Creek contamination, and what happens there. What's going to happen with remedy in that reach, and we don't have enough there. There's not enough money to do. I don't know how much it would cost to do all the removals in that area, but
It'd be more than $5 million.
yes, so there will not be $5 million to allocate to Blacktail Creek to do, the cleanup and a restoration of that. But if EPA were doing something, and we have had that conversation with EPA, what are you going to do here? Is there some way that we can integrate with you in this area?
And
Of course, they say they're interested in that, they'd be willing to do that, but their time period is not within this 2 years that we're looking at here. They may not be within the 4 years that we do the revision on the upper part.
So then I just got to ask, so could the contamination investigation be done under the priority stream work for Blacktail Creek under Upper Clark Fork, and then as a precursor to restoration projects within that stream? And so I guess what I'm thinking is the contamination investigation shows what's there, then EPA comes in and does the remediation, and then there's restoration dollars for.
So at this point in time, the Upper Clark Fork River Basin dollars could not do that.
They could not do.
There's not that money there.
Okay. And not
And
that.
there's not that money in Blacktail Creek.
But in a modification, could there be money allocated for that?
Yeah, the next modification for that is scheduled for 2027 or 28.
Okay,
28.
28.
Yeah, 4 years.
Madam Chair, a couple of clarifications. There was a little crosstalk in that question. I just want to double check on something. If we had pushed pause, that's one of the things we do. Going back to line D, what Jim said, well, you were also speaking at the same time, Jim said it'd be 9.5% of the approved projects or ongoing projects, which right there is $618,000. So if we did push pause, that line item would be expended, would be $58,710.
So if we push pause, this line item here, so this line item is based on expending the entire $5.5 million, John. If we push pause today, and we were going to wait until the Blacktail Creek DEQ finishes that project and the funding comes back to reconvene and do some bigger projects. Our percentage here would go down because it would be based on our workload.
Right, so 9.5% of those dollars there. The workload in that is 9.5%, so it would be $58,000.
So this 9.5% is an estimate of what it would cost for our administrative fees for this. Back in April, when Miranda was here and she went through that whole process of how do we calculate our administrative fees, that's based on a percent of work that we are, the spend rate. So if we're just spending this
Well, that's your final column, June
one
19, which is $618,000. A, B,
Yeah,
and C is
yeah, if we're
$618,000.
just spending this amount here,
Huh?
our administrative fees, based on the conversation that Miranda, for these years, for these 3 years, is going to go down.
To 9.5% of.
No, it's not gonna be, it's gonna be less than 9.5% because because our administrative fees are based on our workload, the payroll that's coming out. And if we're not working on this much in the next 3 years, those administrative fees are going to come down. But what we were asked to do is what is gonna be the closeout for the $5.5 million? So in order for Miranda to do that, she had to make an estimate of what our average administrative fees are. So that's what we have to do. I mean, that's
fine.
you know, but in the next 3 years, if this is the only thing we're doing, this number is going to be,
Less than $58,000.
it's going to be, yeah,
Less than 100%.
right now because, and if you remember this, our administrative fees are based off of last year's expenditures. So this year's expenditures are not going to be that high, because we're down, Pat retired in March. So we're down that staff. So our, next year, right now, the DAO administrative fees is 12%, I believe. Next year, it's going to be, it's going to be based off of this year. It's going to be less than 12%. It may be 8, 7. To be honest with you, I don't exactly know it right off.
And 8% of ongoing projects, not total budget.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, 8% of our administrative fees.
Yeah, but
Incurred.
yeah, it's incurred, but he's talking about, it's what we spend.
Yeah, what do you say? Okay.
Yeah,
And then to follow up, next question, you were sort of talking something a minute ago, and I want to clarify something. If we push pause, so we're not doing work here, will you take money out of BAO and give it to other watersheds?
no,
Okay.
no, no. Under the consent decree and under the restoration plan, these dollars are for BAO.
Great. All right, thanks. I was just clarifying. I was
That's all
trying
we
to
can
follow, I was trying to link it up.
It would take an act of the governor to move something like that, and that is not something that the program has ever recommended or considered. So, but that is, I don't know, Courtney's got a question.
No, that's, are you done, Jim?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Courtney Anigan, on line 3, you've got 1.2 million that have been requested from a bunch of sources. And the makeup of 100,000 was to get to 1.2. So at what rate are you spending that 1.2?
So this is for the Blacktail Creek project.
Correct, line 3.
Right now, we're on, the only thing we're spending on that is just some staff time getting a bid package ready to go out.
Okay, so it's, you still have committed funds from other sources. You don't need this 100K right now. You could come back and ask for it 5 years from now if your spending rate is only $200,000.
No. We have a bid package that we're preparing to send out next week. Once we get that bid package, the agreement we have with Butte Silver Bow and the Butte Country Club is to implement that project with a fall of 2025 through spring of 2026.
Okay, so it would be 1.2 for that year.
Those funds would be spent by this time next year.
And you should know, or John said so, that they've already spent $300,000 getting the bid package ready, doing the design, doing the permitting. considerable cost, water right change. And this project's been going on for several years, and there's embedded costs that are part of the 1.2 million that you referred to in that box.
Yeah. Right. That's why I was asking the question, because I wasn't sure how fast they were spending. But it will get spent within a year once everything is.
It would, yeah. So, yeah, do you, how do you guys want to move forward? You make a decision on, I do think it's important that we make a decision on the council make a recommendation tonight on how we move forward. Be very difficult to get the council and everybody back together during the summer, once things get going. So it's, I think one of the first motions, Elizabeth, would be whether John has talked about it. Do you want to hit pause and just do this top? Or do you want to consider implementing projects and pushing projects? I'll try to get those done within the next couple of years. But as part of the agenda, that there was an action item for that.
So I think the next item then is, does anybody have a motion for that action?
I have a little discussion before a proposed motion. I've written down the motion so that we can come back to it and maybe jiggle a little bit, but I think it's been said really well for years, and you said it a couple times tonight, this money is supposed to be used for restoration. We did a great job doing remediation in so many places because we forced, our hand was forced. But we're supposed to be using this money for restoration, and it's just, we're behind the game. They're not working on a remedy yet. We're too far in. And I think 2.5 years ago, or 2 years ago, we we're at the Thornton building when we found out really that, wait, why are we still spending money on all these projects? We don't have any projects in front of us. We really found out about this administrative cost thing. And so we asked for these shovel ready things. That was about 2 years ago. And I think in the interim, we said either find us something big, something that really meets the standard of what we did before, or find us something that's shovel ready that we can do something with, right? And it's been about 2 years. We've been doing this process and trying to get to this since we figured out that we're just sort of whittling down the budget on administrative costs without doing work. And I think I've had, just in the last 2 weeks, I've had 3-4 meetings, either phone calls or in person, where people really feel like we've lost our way. BNRC. They had comments like all of our previous projects came from massive public participation and the projects filtered up from there. And this time, the things that are sort of coming at us are sort of coming down from on high. And I think there's been a lot of people sort of unhappy with that. And a lot of them just feel like these are sort of, as good as you guys have done with this, a lot of these just feel like they're make work projects to expend the money. And I get it. We asked for you to find these for us, in lieu of, obviously not finding a big project like Parrot or the Basin Creek water treatment system that we could do something with. And we didn't find those. So I sort of have I have a proposed amendment to push pause, which I'll read out right now. And it comes with sort of these, why? We're not closing out, we're just putting it on pause. I do agree with A, but if we're going to fund that, I think we need to make sure it's an experienced person that's on there. And I'll talk about what in my motion is about that. I think we really need to return to the guidelines of the document of 2007. This work is supposed to be done by a local person. And I think if we go back and read that, I remember that meeting when Harley originally, Pat first left. And Harley's like, we're not going to replace it, we're going to do it from Butte. And I pulled open the document and I said, the word shall is in this. It is a legal word, which is why an attorney used to have to be ahead of this group. And Harley looked at me and he shook his head. He's like, you're right. And we went and hired. And luckily Pat came. But we're not following the document.
So we hired Ray for that.
And we're not following the document. Thank you, fired Ray. But we're not following the document now. And it's just making me a little bit, I just don't feel good about what we're doing right now. So here's my motion, my proposed motion, which I'm not going to move right now. I'm going to read it out so that the team can hear it. But I'm moving to push pause for the next 3 months, for the next meeting date of September 18th to 25, with the following caveats. That the budgetary request for the Butte remedy, restoration coordination, CD compliance, and liability monitoring is granted only so long as the person staffing that work has A, had direct boots on the ground project management role of BNRC projects in excess of $1 million in the Butte area and has worked that project in excess of 2 years. It's little b. I think we need to honor the pre-existing approved contracts for revegetation. And I don't want to take the amendment to take money away from Eric, to be honest. I don't think we should be slashing that budget to actually plant trees and save budget for the administrative costs, but I think we can talk about that. We need to rehire the Butte coordinator per the requirements of the document. And we need to amend the closeout administration fees to make sure it really says that it's 9.5% of only open and approved contracts. And then finally, there was, yeah, that's it. That 9.5% gets open and approved contracts. And we've just pushed pause. There's this thing happening in a month on the Blacktail, and there's this other stuff you guys are revising in 27. This thing can earn interest. And if you guys are going to charge 9.5% against A, B, and C on either column over these next 3 years or X amount of time till we actually have something happening, I think that there's reason for us to push pause on this. That's a logical reason, because honestly, I'm not going to be able to look at our constituents, our community, with any sort of pride about how we closed it out with what's up there. And we even just gutting the water thing. I mean, again, we took 64% out of planting trees. We took 58% out of water meters. We only took 20% on paying you guys. That's not doing cleanup here. That's not restoring here. And maybe if we push pause, we allow these expenses we approved to happen, we'll let this thing accrue interest, and we come back every 3 months and check until we get to a place where we have enough money to do something real. And I've heard the argument. I'm sort of past the motion now, I apologize, but I've sort of heard the argument we're going to lose institutional knowledge. But to be frank, this remedy isn't going to be done for 20 years. None of one's going to be here. 20 years, this fund has a lot of money in it, and it can be resat, it can be restaffed, it can be re-kicked in the can, and true restoration work can happen. But I don't feel that where we're at right now, I would not feel comfortable with approving anything in the proposed projects. And I would not feel comfortable looking any of our constituents in the eyes and said we did good with the final amount of money we had here. So my motion is something along those lines. I can read it out again. We can edit, we can discuss as a team, but that's my motion, is to push pause. Those notes I made.
We have comment from the council on that?
Well, I cannot support that motion. I think we've got some legitimate projects on this chart. I think that Butte bow on the meters project came back and are willing to do a 2-year pilot project that's going to make a difference to the individuals who cannot afford to get this meter put on, helping them help themselves with respect to water conservation in these times. The quicker we get water users on meters, more water we're going to save. I think this is a reasonable approach. It's going to be spent over the course of a couple of years. It's going to be all cost reimbursable. I think that project has merit, and I think it's a project that if we're not going to do the project because we're pushing pause, I think that's a mistake. And I also think that the proposal that's been put forth in front of us on the Basin Creek Reservoir is a stepping stone to the public access that is entirely consistent with previous commitments by this board. And, you know, at $735,000, I think it can make a big difference in our community, because in addition to restoring the resource, the law provides that we get to replace lost opportunities. And that will go a long way in that direction as well. And likewise, the meters project in the water conservation vein is to replace the lost use of the groundwater resources that have been hosed up because of mining. And that has held true since the first grant was given in 2001 to do water pipes and throughout the odds in the decade of doing 17,000 linear feet a year. And it made a big difference in our community. Then the dam, then the water treatment plant. Those investments in infrastructure make a difference. And I cannot say that these are, fill-in projects that are make work projects. These are important projects, John, and I think that they've been presented to us sincerely and with some thought. So I don't want to push pause. I want to get some of this money working in our community to do some projects that will make a difference. So I don't know. I agree with everything else you said on rows A, B, C, and we got to continue to watch D. I wouldn't deduct any money from rows C. Appreciate Butte Silver Bowl coming in and saying their spend rate will be about $55,000 a year. But if they get innovative or some changes occur, we don't want to then have to go back and put money back into that account. Again, it's not like we're spending the money to $411,000 overnight. We've been told it'll be spent $55,000 this year and maybe for the next couple of years. But let's leave that window open. I think there's some good work on this chart, and I think we should get going on some of this stuff. I don't want to push pause. I just think that we can get some good work done. And I think we started this conversation, being concerned that we're being billed for road D, and there are any projects going on in Butte. And come on, let's get some stuff done. So I want to get some stuff done, and that's my perspective.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Suzanne Nordwick, on the council. I support the motion. I do think that we're getting to the point where it's just become a kind of a jobs program sort of bit. On the water meters, we had 2 public comments tonight, one in the room and one online, that had questions about if, this is where we are supposed to be spending the restoration dollars. I know that, the state did a study and has it someplace where they justify that it is, but I personally am going to vote no on the water meters when it comes up. I just think there's too many questions, and it's not like anyone's being denied water because they don't have a free water meter. And there are other some sources available. I just think public comment needs to be more sought on that program instead of us just doing it just based on what was heard tonight. I do support the Basin Creek. I think that would be a nice addition to the community, but I mean, it's not going to be built this summer, so it's not going to be impacted by a 3-month pause. I just do think that that would be good to be more impactful. And every time I turn around, half of the stuff we discussed tonight is like, well, should this be done under remedy? And so I support it. Thank you.
Other council comment?
Seconded, I guess.
Well, this is Courtney. I'm going to go through just briefly through the budgets. When I total the committed funds, you get 1.15 billion. That's correct, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then when you sum the uncommitted proposed projects, that comes to 3.9. And when you sum the 2, you get a little over 5 million.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And we have 500 and 5.6 million to work with. So we still have a balance of 500,000. And I liked what I heard this evening. I particularly liked that people came back and reduced their particular budgets, or budgets were manipulated a little bit, so everything came under the total that was available. I know that this board is, or this council will be back meeting because we have funds coming from other sources in future. We don't know exactly when that's going to happen. So this council's not done meeting. You know, even with the 500,000, I was going to make the comment that Montana Tech has 318,000, but every year they can ask for a 10% contingency. So that particular budget could go to 350,000, 10% of that. That means that the NRDP would get 9.5% more from that 30,000. It's not very much. But the point is that that 500,000 that still exists in excess would cover that. So I was ready to come in here and just say we need to freeze Montana Tech's account so that they can't go after that contingency if all of our funds were to be spent tonight. And I want that on the record that we discussed that. So the funds are there. I liked what I heard, particularly because people came back. I did not expect them to come back with lower budgets. I'm going to rephrase that motion to just say, I want to see the more detailed budgets on how this is done. Good Excel spreadsheets so that I can follow the money a little easier. And make that decision in September. That's the same thing as a freeze until September, because I'm not saying we're going to vote on those projects right now. I want a detailed budget to make a sound decision in September. So it's the same thing as the freeze. But I'm ambivalent about saying yes on just because of tonight. I was ready to come in here and say the same thing that John said, John McKee, and Suzanne said. Now I'm okay with what I heard, but I still want to see more precise, more better budgets rather than what we heard tonight. So that's my stuff.
Thank you.
Elizabeth,
Hang on just 1 second. You'll be right next after Bill, sister.
thank you.
Yeah, Bill Callahan. I just did a quick figure on the projects, the A, B, C, and D, including leaving in the 411 for Butte Silver Bowl for the tree project. And I added in the costs for the water meters. And I also added in the cost for the enhancements to Basin Creek, the park pavilion and parking list, and came up with a figure of about 3.3 million. I think I have to agree with the facts that I'd like to see this. I'd like to see the facts and figures spread out on a spreadsheet so that I can make a better decision about, about the entire thing. And so I think too that I'd like to see a pause at least for 3 months until we can have some more facts and figures here. I don't want to put this off and I don't want to stop all the way, but I want a little bit more clarity before I go ahead and say, yeah, let's do these other projects. That's kind of where I'm coming from. So I'm going to vote in favor of the pause.
Sister?
I too will vote in favor of the pause, not because the projects in themselves are not worthy, but I would like to see more detail. And the fact that we did not get the budget printed out from Butte Silver Bowl was kind of difficult to try and figure out the differences in what they had proposed earlier and they are tonight. So I too would like clarification and the information before our next meeting so we have time to look at it. I would appreciate that, but I would at this point say yes to the motion as it was made.
Do we have public comment on the motion?
Don't need anybody.
Nobody online? Nobody online? All right. Think we'll go forward then. Do you,
So
Do I need to clarify the motion?
yeah,
Yeah.
you need to clarify, okay.
you can, John, do you want to clarify, or we do have we have a Word document that we could bring up and type it out so you guys can agree to it? Or do you just want to read it into the recording and then we can use that?
I think based on what I heard here, I could probably read it to the recording and see if I get it right. So I'll move and everybody can say, is that correct? And then we can second guess. So I'll move that we're gonna push pause for the next 3 months with the next meeting date of 9/18/25. Little one, budgetary request for the Butte remedy, restoration coordination, CD compliance and liability monitoring is granted so long as the person staffing that work, little A, has had direct boots on the ground project management role of a BNRC project in excess of $1 million. And little B has worked on that project in excess of at least 2 years. Then number 2, honor the pre-existing approved contracts for the A, B, and C on this chart up here. And I think what I heard from Bill and others is put Eric's budget back to 411. And not the 150. 3, rehire the Butte coordinator per the requirements of the document. And then 4, which was, we are confirming with you that 9.5% of closeout administration fees will only be applied to current ongoing projects and not the final budget. I think that's sort of where we're at. Everyone, please let me know if I missed before I say move.
Did you have questions on that?
So just a clarification.
Please.
I think previously you had a time period in there for that pause.
Yeah, push pause for 3 months with a meeting date of 9/18/25. So Thursday, September 18th.
Go ahead.
I just have a question, Suzanne. The dollar amounts on the project management you're talking about, is that what's in the agreement right now?
Yeah, I guess I'm just looking for real clarification because I guess 2 years ago we were sort of surprised and then it's 12% and it's 10%, it's 9.5%.
No, like, when they rehired the new coordinator, you had some.
But,
project management experiment. Is that what's in spelled out now in the?
not to my knowledge, no.
In the project management stuff, if I understand it
The
correctly.
person working line item A
Yeah,
has to have had
Oh, okay.
so that's,
direct project management. No, this, it could potentially be if they want to rehire Pat to go do it, but it's somebody who's actually worked the project on the ground in Butte
Okay.
with a value of excess of $1 million and have actually worked that project
Something.
for greater than 2 years. So there's someone who really knows what we're talking about down here.
all right. Do you guys have that?
It's on the recording.
Okay.
So,
Do you have any questions on it?
I probably have comments on it, but, that's your motion.
Mhm.
So you guys can make that motion and, I don't think that it's reasonable to put those constraints on, the project management, perspective, for the program. If Jim decides to retire, I decide to retire, the program doesn't have anybody that's worked on Butte for, I guess, Catherine has worked on.
Well, I think you make the
So-
point for us, is we shouldn't be paying anyone to do all of this liability monitoring if they've never even worked on projects. I mean, I think you're sort of
If
clarifying the point.
if that's the context of your comment, that's different than the way I read it. I heard it as, we can't have anybody do anything on it, because we do, I mean, Catherine could review documents, or I could review documents, or Jim could review documents, yeah, okay.
All right.
That's-
Is is there any other comment?
I need a second.
I thought you seconded.
Okay, that was-
Okay,
So if we, this is Courtney Young, if we put a pause, I'll go to your comment that you made. So let's say somebody we want to hire they give us a detailed budget so we can understand it, and that's what Bill and I talked.
Thank you.
And nobody can work on this, or nobody can be paid to work on this. Then what we do if we're gonna ask for a detailed budget, because that's what I want. And so I don't want a pause. I want just detailed information in order to make a good, solid decision. We're making a $5 million decision here on projects that I think are pretty reasonable, and I agree with John Cecil. I'm ambivalent about voting for the pause when we're actually doing the same thing, but we're just asking for more details, and we're gonna vote on it in September. It's not
so
quite the
you would
same
like
thing as
to
the pause.
table it and get more information and,
In the end, it's the same thing, but people can still work on this project. Otherwise, by pausing it, they're not gonna get paid if they're working on it. And I don't think that's what this council really wants.
Yeah, no, I'm done. John says so. I'm troubled by the motion because there's an agenda here that talks about pausing for an extended period of time. And I think there's some confusion relative to the use of the term pause, because I am not in any way, shape, or form in favor of pausing. Our opportunity to work on projects for any extended period of time. Now, if council members feel they need more information to make a good decision on the projects that are in front of us, then I think it's much more appropriate to table that decision until September and give the staff some specific instruction on what we expect to be done, what we want in front of us, and not, no offense, not on September 11th, not on September 4th, but sometime well in advance of the meeting, so we can, get our act together on making some decisions in the fall. But I don't know whether it's the use of the term pause or what, but I object to the notion that the projects on the table here are work projects for the entity that has proposed them, and they're not sincere proposals that were brought to us based on our request for them. So I can't support the motion. I really don't know. It's a pretty detailed motion. I don't get a lot of the detail, partly because I can't hear anymore, and partly because it's pretty complex. So I can vote to have to vote no on the motion, but I don't mind the idea. I mean, based on what you told us, Doug, I mean, there's not going to be any projects that are going to get done in 2025 here. I mean, we got to bid projects. It's better to bid them in the fall and in the winter for work that we get next year. So we came back in September, made some decisions on some projects, and then I didn't quite understand what you said. I know you said that the Basin Creek improvements do not require a plan amendment. But based on the 2-year pilot on the meters project, does that require because it's much less than 10% of the original category?
Yeah, the original allocation was $10 million. The plan states that if it's less than 10% of the original allocation, it doesn't require it.
But 2046, it would not require an amendment. So those two projects could move forward with a decision in September and then go to bid and get rolling and get completed in the 2-year window that had been our goal to try to get some projects done. I guess I could live with that. Business as usual up top, ABC. I like the attempt to try to memorialize the indirect cost that gets charged. But as I understand the motion now, and maybe I'm putting too much emphasis on the word cause, we can just segregate that. And I don't like the notion that we're pausing because, like Member Young says, I want stuff to happen in the next 3 months. I don't want to just not do anything and let this stuff sit and get stale. We've got some specific questions. When I read the original proposal on the meters and the detail here, I guess a new chart can be prepared with that detail a little bit more than what Zane presented here tonight. But the detail on the improvements project at Basin Creek is pretty detailed. I guess we could get a new chart that says, the existing pavilion is eliminated from the scope of work, and it brings it down to 735 from 884. I mean, those changes could be made, but the notion of pause is troubling to me.
Excuse me, Elizabeth. Catherine has a question.
Okay. Go ahead, Catherine.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Catherine Houserath with NRDP. I want to make sure I'm understanding what is intended with this motion. Obviously, the BNRC can make a recommendation for how it chooses to move forward with whether or not to recommend a restoration plan amendment. But as far as the very specific pieces of that motion that would be, attempting to direct the actions of NRDP, how would the BNRC see that being conveyed to the governor as a recommendation?
Is there?
Well, I guess one, why would it need to be conveyed to the governor where the advisory council is conveying to staff? And then two, if it needs to be conveyed to the governor, I'll go talk to him.
So you want to make a recommendation directly to NRDP, is what you're saying?
Well, you make a recommendation to us,
Right.
but is a recommendation to the governor. So your
And
recommendation.
I guess I'm curious for a question
Your recommendation is to the governor. It's not to.
ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, John, back to your point though, I guess 2 years ago, the preamble to this motion was we asked for information. In the last 2 years, we've gotten flat PDF of Excel files. We finally got Excel files that did not have calculations in them, so they could not be followed. We've been doing this for 2 years while expending administrative costs just to figure out what money's being spent. And we haven't got clarity. So push and pause is a little bit, and I'll say it just clean and clear. It's a little bit about, okay, we're fed up. You had 2 years. We can pull up the emails of flat files and Excels without any calculations in them. I mean, we're not getting what we're asking for. In the meantime, we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars per year to stand up an office in Helena without doing concrete work, large scale concrete work as we used to. And we're responsible for money that's getting fettered away. I hear your point. You want to just spend it all and we're not fettering it away. That's a really good perspective. I get it, but I guess I'm looking for something better and better.
I have a question, Bill Callahan. So if we hit pause until September, until we get the information that some of us like to be able to see, is that,
Information we've already asked for. We never got correctly.
yeah. We're still going to be able to, you guys are still going to be able to pay for A, B, C, and D. Is that, I mean,
Yes, that is correct. Yeah,
Okay.
there's no issue there. I do have to, go on record, John, and let you know that we have been providing you guys financial documentation since 2008. And we have, you have reviewed those and approved those yearly. And yes, recently you have started questioning those. And we have provided you with everything that you have asked for on those. Miranda has gone into depth and provided you with all of the information that you have asked for. So saying that we have not done that for 2 years, I take, from a program's perspective, that is not correct. Miranda and the other staff and Helena have worked very hard at putting that financial information together to try to answer your question.
But this is Courtney Young again, but the definition of pause means no money gets spent for 3 months if we agree to this motion.
So this is what the council's right. This has to be defined by the council, and if it's paused just to do A, B, C, and D, that's fine. We can do that. But if you want to go back and you want more information, I think what we would have to do is, I think that needs to be a request that you need. And I think with Courtney, what we'd have to do is sit down with you, and the same thing with Zane and Eric, and what more information do you want? How much more detail? How much more do you want, for instance, Jim to go into a design on this dewatering plan and do the modeling? But that, as you say, that costs money. So we can't hit pause on that. We have to spend money to do that, to get that more information. So that would have to be clarified in a motion.
But, Robert's rules of order is we've got a motion on the floor, it's
Right.
been seconded, and we've got to make a decision.
Right, on that.
And if the decision is to table, which is what I would prefer at this point, knowing what I know, and get more detailed information. We're not saying yes to any proposed projects. So nothing is going to happen on those proposed projects until we say yes. So it's the same thing as a pause, except we can spend little things here and there on proposals or whatever, the time that gets committed to writing those up. I just didn't see a lot of the detail. And a good example was Jim explaining on the 250,000 where that was coming from. And it was based on experience. Okay, and I get that experience. But I want to see that experience. And then I want to see what's the time frame that 250,000 is going to get spent over. Is it 1 year? Is it 4 years? What? And I think if we have to vote again on the motion that's currently on the floor, but what I would re-motion then is if we table the motion
Or substitute.
or
Or
substitute.
you in the motion before you pause.
Yeah, well, I think the pause has a meaning to it. It means you're gonna pause expenditures. That's clear. That's it. If we make no decision on the proposed projects, the end result is the same, but we can still work on these projects. If we pause them, we cannot work on them. And I think that's detrimental for what we're trying to do.
Sister Mary Jo has a question online.
Go ahead, sister.
I did, and my question is, or rather, my comment is, it seems to me A, B, C, and D, we are contracted for. And so we have to honor that contract, and those monies should be available. The projects listed below may not be approved by us, or they may be altered by us in some way, but we need more information that we did not have at the beginning of this evening. So I would appreciate we get more information, honor the contracts we do have, and then look forward to the new contracts that we may be accepting. And we may be entering into contract with different groups for the various things. But I think the reality is we don't have the money in hand yet for everything. We're waiting for money to come back from other times and other places. And until we have it in hand, I don't know that we can commit to all these projects.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Suzanne, here, I think part of John's thought on the pause is because these other things that Courtney wants somebody to be working on over pause are supposed to be worked on by a Butte coordinator, which we don't have. And was that a decision was that job not, was that a conscious decision for the NRD not to be for that position?
So when Pat retired in March, we were in this process of trying to figure out whether we were going to hit pause or move forward with projects. So from a management decision at NRDP, my decision was to let's wait to see where this goes. Jim was leading the alluvial dewatering aspect of the project. So let's wait to see where this goes. If this goes pause, and the only thing we're working on up here, we're going to need a certain type of person to fill that position. If we're implementing projects down here, it might be something different. So just from a efficiency standpoint and trying to get the best person to where we need, there was no reason to hire somebody back in April when we didn't know what we were doing. So that was my decision.
Okay, and I guess, and that, I think that's important. I mean, there's supposed to be a job review from this fund, so right now there isn't a job. There isn't somebody working.
Specifically in a Butte office.
Right.
But we do have an office here, and we do have staff here in the Butte office.
But that's not the document. That's a equivocation on the document, the terms of the document. It is a person working in Butte, who lives in Butte, who works in the office, not driving down from Helena every once in a while.
Ray lives in Butte. He works in the Butte office. He has worked there ever since.
On BAO exclusively?
And no.
Okay, then that's not the
And
document.
Pat didn't work on BAO.
And again, that's the problem. The document wasn't followed.
Well, John,
We need
this
to
is
rein it in.
this is part of the problem that we have is that you want us to reduce these costs. So one of the things we did is when Pat wasn't busy, because Pat was not billing, Pat was billing about half of his time to BAO because there wasn't enough to do. So he was working on the Yellowstone. He was working on Silverbow Creek and working on Parrot. So if we put somebody in Butte and that's all they're supposed to do, that's going to drive these costs up of what they currently are. But I think we need to resolve the motion and.
We do. So, do we want to make a substitute motion? Or would you like to vote on the motion I had and then move on from there?
I'll withdraw the motion. It's just so distasteful. I can't. Yeah, I'll withdraw the motion. You guys figure out what you want to do.
Okay, well, then I'll make a new motion. Thank you, John. I do support what you're trying to do. Don't get me wrong. It's just that I've got new information here that I did not expect to get, and I got it tonight. And so my motion would be to, if we are going to reconvene on September 18th, then I would like detailed spreadsheets, as detailed as possible. I'll leave that up to the NRDP or whoever is going to do this by August 18th. So I have a month to look this over. And perhaps somebody on the council will say, what about this? What about this? And then we can get back to you or whoever and get those details. But right now, I worry about 250,000 when I get the experience, but what are the details of that budget? Let me see something. Okay. And then we're hearing, well, 150,000 is now proposed instead of 411. Why did those numbers decrease? I'm not interested in why. I just want justification of the 150. If that's what that's committed money, that's fine. I'm okay to recommit back to 400. But if they can't spend it, they can't spend it. I just want the details. So let me go back. My motion is to have detailed budgets August 18th, and then we can make an informed decision September 18th.
Second.
Okay, do we have some comments on the motion? Any comments from the council?
Doesn't be coordinator. You're going to do anything, or you're not putting restrictions on it?
No, I don't think we need the Butte coordinator until we know what the proposed projects are. That's pretty well explained. When those proposed projects are in, I think the Butte coordinator might be very busy with 6 additional projects and the 3 ABC on top.
All right, any questions from the public on that motion?
Nothing.
Comments? Okay. Are we ready to vote? Okay, all in favor of Courtney's motion?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
And then passes unanimously.
All opposed?
All opposed?
No.
No. Sorry, I thought I heard you say aye, John. Apologize.
We will be in contact, I guess, with all of you guys, especially Bill and Courtney or whoever wants more detail. We will contact you and figure out what additional detail you guys want, so we can make sure we answer all your questions.
Okay. We have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.